um, we call it the results economy sort of approach to being in, your own business, being entrepreneurial. And I love marketing and I love real estate. And those two things have been just the ultimate uh, laboratory for me for those 34 years. I've been able to figure out a lot of stuff. And in those years, a lot has changed and a lot has not changed. And
Mm.
so it's always exciting times. I love to progress. I love to stay with what's you know apply what's new. So imagine all the technological advances that we've had over these 34 years. The thing when we started out, the state of the art technology wise was the thermal paper fax machine that we had in our office and the digital pager that you could get a text message on your pager
Mhm.
to tell you that somebody had called. And then it was right on the heels of that, then cell phones and the internet and all that. So I've had a great time exploring it. But I started out, as a real estate agent, trying to figure out all the things that everybody tries to figure out now, especially, you learn early in the business that getting listings is the key.
Mm.
Listers last. That's the whole thing, right? And everybody wants to be a listing agent. And I spent a lot of time making cold calls. That's how I started out. Made 100 calls a day, and it worked. I was really good at it. And but the thing that happened was when you make a lot of cold calls and you get really busy, and you're the only agent, you get busy serving those clients, and then you don't have time to make the cold calls, and all those closings happen, and then you got to get right back on the hamster wheel
Mm.
and make that happen. So a couple of things happened to me very early on, or 1991. I spent 3 years trying to figure all that out, or the best of what I could, and then I discovered direct response marketing, and I discovered uh, Michael Gerber. Discovered the book The E Myth that I got on a really deep level. Like I understood the concept of creating something like you're going to duplicate it 5,000 times, the franchise prototype. So that's been my secret formula for 30 years now. I've started applying, working on my business, on my real estate business, to solve the things that not only I was trying to solve, but that all the real estate agents are trying to solve. And so just brief history. I started out, the first thing that I did was I put together a guide to Halton Hills real estate prices, which was the area in Toronto that I lived. In Toronto, there's it's all called the Greater Toronto Area, and there's all the suburbs all around. And I lived in one of those suburbs called Halton Hills. And when I figured out now, instead of making cold calls, that I could run an ad and use recorded messages, have people call and listen, leave their information on a recorded message, or fax their request for the guide in, or mail it in. I had a little coupon thing.
Mm.
I started generating all these leads of people that were now coming to me instead of me having to make these outbound phone calls. And I still remember the day that I got the replies from my first direct mail campaign, that I had sent out some postcards to apartment complexes with a business reply card on them. And there were 2,500 apartments in this area where I mailed. And I got to my office. And as I parked outside, I could see through the window. Joanne, the receptionist, was in there, and she was waving something over her head as I was coming in. And when I got there, she, presented me with this little stack with a rubber band around them of these business reply cards that people had sent back asking for the book on the guide on buying your first home.
Mm.
And there were 11 of them that first day. And instead of making my cold calls, I went in my office and I started calling these 11 people. And I connected with 6 of them right away. They were all friendly. They all knew why I was calling. They wanted the guide. They were looking to buy a home. They were like dream prospects that you would have to call for a week to find 6 really great prospects like these ones, zero rejection, zero getting sworn at or anything like that. And so from that moment, I remember that day specifically because it was the last day that I ever made a cold call. I sat back after I had gone through the stack, and I still get the feeling right now. I still get this warm, giddy feeling that comes over me when I realize that in that moment, I would never have to make a cold call again because I had figured out how to get real prospects to call me. So I started developing those things for my business. And then the next step of that was that I created a guide called Toronto and Beyond. And it was 40 great places to live within an hour of the city. And I licensed my system exactly the way I figured it out. I licensed it to 40 different real estate agents all around Toronto, and one in each of the 40 communities or 40 suburbs in the Greater Toronto area. And I would run ads offering the Toronto and Beyond guide, and we would generate those leads and refer them to the people in the 40 suburbs for a referral fee. And they were running the system locally in their own market as well. And then I met Joe Stump, and we hit it off, and we teamed up. And I spent the next 15 years building by referral only with Joe. And we went, used a lot of these systems and developed all the turnkey tools and coaching for realtors, and went all around North America every year for 15 years doing big real estate seminars and building our organization. And so that's been the path to here.
That's amazing, dude. That's you just gave us a lot. I appreciate that intro. And it's funny, one of the things I wrote down a couple notes. That's probably the longest I've done 280 episodes, probably the longest I've gone without speaking.
Wind me up. Yeah.
It's good.
How long do we go?
About 35 minutes or so.
Okay, great. All right.
Yeah, so I'm on. I appreciate you being here, man. I'm excited to have you. We've been trying to make this happen for a while.
Yeah.
You brought me back to the fax machine. It's kind of funny. I remember, back in the day making my calls, and they'd be like, okay, I'm going to do it. And then you'd send the fax out, and you'd be waiting, pacing the office for the fax to come back. At least that was me. Maybe not.
Right. Yeah.
That's how we did it. But something you said in the beginning, and you said some things have changed. A lot of things have changed, and some things haven't changed. So what would you say is one of the things that haven't changed in the last 36 years since you started real estate?
Well, I think, the technologies have changed. All of the thing, everybody's thinking now digital marketing, digital wasn't even a thing back then. And, when I started looking at this, in that realization, it's kind of timely. The US Open is at Brookline this week in Massachusetts. I don't know if you follow golf, but
I do. But I'll try to get out the one.
Well, here's the thing. So what I looked at things that in golf, a lot of things have changed over the last 30 years. All the technologies, golf ball technology, driver technology, shaft technology, all of the things to hit the ball farther, straighter, whatever. But what hasn't changed is the scoring average. That in all of these things, we go back 30 years, the longest driver on tour was hitting the ball 279 yards. Now it's 350 yards. And the scoring average has improved by 1/4%. So
it's funny you say that, because I follow Formula One, and they were saying something very similar the other day, that although the Formula One cars have evolved, they have more horsepower now. They're in some ways faster. The track times haven't really changed
That's
that
interesting,
much.
right? So what I look at with that you still have to be able to be a good golfer, and you still have to be able to putt, and you still have to be able to get the ball in the hole and score. And a driver is not being able to drive the ball 50 yards further isn't the thing that helps you score better, you know? And so that's the same kind of thing that the realtors run into, is that the new driver of realtors is trying to run digital ads to generate a bunch of leads. But you still got to be able to convert the leads. You still got to be
Mm,
able to build relationships. You can't digitize the last 100 feet of a real estate transaction. It's always and still is a negotiation, a relationship between at least two completely irrational people, and you're negotiating the market value of the only house like this one in the world today. And there's no algorithm for that, right?
mm.
People get emotional about those kind of things. So you still the skills have to be the same. And what
Well, you
hasn't,
said a relationship too, though,
yeah,
is another key, right? It's the relationship.
absolutely it is, because it's being able to manage the emotions of the situation. But if the equivalent of scoring percentage is, days on market and the percentage of list price, that people get. Now we're in a unique situation for the last couple of years where we've seen, because of the low supply, the people are getting above the asking price. I was just doing some numbers for Tucson. And last year, the average percentage of listed price was 102% of
Yeah.
list price
One
was what.
108 over here for a while.
Okay, great. So
Yeah.
that's the thing. So there you go. And the thing that hasn't changed among sellers is they still want to get the highest price in the least amount of time with the least amount of inconvenience or hassles. That's unchanging. That was exactly what they wanted in 1988, and it's the same thing they want in 2022. Now, what people are seeing, what I'm always looking at is, people are looking at the iBuyers. Like, you can right now, there's lots of safety nets for people. You could basically sell your house to Open Door or to OfferPad or any of the iBuyers, uh, at pretty close to or above what market value is. But when you take out what the fees are and stuff, the net dollars, you could probably still do better by selling it with a real estate
Oh,
agent,
yeah.
to get the top dollar. But what that's proving is that people, I look at it, that's proving that people are willing to pay more for certainty, and they're willing to pay more for getting the price and closing 3 days from now, and not having to show the house or do the repairs or do the prepping of it and be constantly, on guard for when people are coming by. And I think that's a big opportunity, as for our community, that if you can raise the level of service and the level of opportunity you're able to create for people,
Mm.
they're willing to pay more money for it. I don't think there's at all downward pressure on commissions. I think there's upward opportunity on offering turnkey solutions. And
So
there's lots of different iterations of that now. You're starting to see hybrids of that where you can get some money now and still hold out to get the top dollar by exposing it to the whole market.
okay. I want to touch, man, so much. I mean, we could probably go 4 hours on this. We're not going to, obviously, but I want to talk about what you said about downward. You said, you're the first person I've heard say that in a while, that you don't believe there's a downward pressure on commissions.
No.
Yet, as an industry, that's very common
Mhm.
jargon, that we are experiencing downward pressure.
Yeah.
So talk to us about that.
Well, I think that what the iBuyers are proving is that if you bring your checkbook, that's the ultimate listing presentation. If I come into you, or you and I are up against each other for a listing, and we're going to, talk about selling your cousin's house, and they brought you in, but they also brought me in, and we're talking about, if I bring my checkbook and I said to them, "You got a beautiful house. How much do you want for it?" And they say a number, and I say, "Yeah, that's right about what the value is. When do you want to move?" "Well, as soon as possible." And if I were to say, "Okay, I'll take it. How's next week closing for you?" There would be no need for me to tell them my marketing plan, or they're not comparing that. They would call
Yeah.
you, their cousin, and say, "Hey, we're good. We got what we wanted." The only reason nobody wants to list their house. What they want is, they want a check. And
Mm,
in the absence of somebody giving them that check, they're going to choose the person that they believe is going to get them to the check the fastest for the most amount of money, and they have to make that judgment decision. So in the absence of you bringing your checkbook, the next best thing that you can bring on a listing presentation is a buyer and their checkbook. And so the good news is that one of the things that we can do right now, and you've heard me talk about, uh, setting up into a market maker position by picking categories, by picking a category that you can triangulate. You can get the buyers, you can run ads, digital ads, print ads, all kinds of things to find people who are looking for that particular type of home, whether it's oceanfront houses on Cape Ann, or whether it's, oceanfront condos in South Beach, or mountain view homes in Colorado, or whatever it is, townhouses in Poughkeepsie, whatever it is. If you've got a way to generate a pool of buyers who are looking for townhouses,
mm,
and you've got a way to identify future home sellers, people who are likely to sell their house in the next 18 months or 2 years, now you've got this growing list that's a competitive advantage. You've got buyers on one side, you've got future sellers on the other side. We take all those, we create a Google map layer that drops a pin where everybody is. And then whenever you've got a buyer that's now actively going out to look at townhomes, you can reach out to all of the people who've raised their hand to ask for your price report on the townhouse activity, and introduce the idea of them maybe being able to sell their house without even putting it on the market.
mm.
That's an attractive thought for people, right? And that's where we want to. I think it's more important to think that way. There's a lot of talk about branding, as that you've got to brand yourself. And, I've got my definition of brand is a little bit different. I use an acronym, that what we are trying to establish is a brand, but that means that we're trying to establish a buying reflex affecting now decisions. That's the acronym. That
Mm.
all we want to do, the only effective reason to have a brand, is that when somebody thinks we need to get our house on the market, or it's time to
So
sell, that their reflex thought
it's Dave.
is, we got to call David Hill.
Mm, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's
That's how
great.
you compete also against the agent who's been farming an area for years, who owns it based on their personal branding. Most people are spending a lot of time and money to get their name out there, and they're doing it successfully. Like, they're doing it, it works. It's expensive to get famous. But what I try and focus on is, let's get rich. It's a lot less expensive to get rich than it is to get famous, because when you're trying to get rich, you're not focused on getting your name out there to everybody. You're focused on trying to get their name in here. not your name out there.
Mm.
When we do the main events, I would do an experiment. We'd have, 800 people in a room, and I would look at somebody in the front row and I'd say, "Hey, David, I'm going to give you two choices here. Number one, let's pretend that this 800 person audience is an 800 home subdivision that you're farming, and everybody in here owns one of the 800 homes in that neighborhood. And I'm going to give you a chance to come up here on stage, introduce yourself, tell everybody all about you and why they should choose you. And I'll hand out one of your business cards to everybody in the room. Or you can stay right there in your seat, and I'll have somebody bring you an envelope. And in that envelope will be a piece of paper with the name, address, contact information of the 80 people in this room that are going to sell their house in the next 12 months. Which one would you choose? And it's everybody knows that it'd be so much better to know who the 80 people are actually going to sell it are. And so that's what we have to look at. And a 10% turnover in a neighborhood is high. Most of them are in the 5 or 6% range. So out of 1,000 homes that you're spending money to try and get your name out there, you're really only speaking to 50 or 60 of them who are even going to sell their house in the next year. So the best course of action is to try and draw those people out. Make an offer that they would raise their hand and identify themselves as a future seller instead of just looking for people who want to sell right now. Yeah.
So I want to transition a little bit. I did the title is Take Listings with No Cold Calling, and obviously your process. You've said many times, and I also want to make sure we talk about certainty, because you mentioned the word certainty, and also today's market. Like right now, June 15th, as we're recording this, 2022, there's a lot of uncertainty out there. So I also want to know kind of how you're positioning real estate agents to deal with that. But I want to first, before we get there, I want you to tell us, like, you kind of have a rule where you said you don't want your phone to take incoming or outgoing.
This was my
only incoming, right?
My provocation when I was setting up that's the greatest thing. Like, I was one at a time. I knew that what I love to do is solve puzzles and to crack the code on something. And I knew that the Holy Grail, if I could figure out how to get listings with the condition that my phone only accepts incoming calls, that would be the big win. And so that's what I set to work doing. And, in 2005, I cracked the code. And, I figured out exactly the psychology of how to get leads of people who are going to sell their house. First of all, the big thing that I figured out was that not everybody sells their house right away. Everybody's looking for the right now leads. And that's where everybody's competing, like the hound dog pack chasing the expired listings the moment they come off the thing, or the FSBOs the moment they do it, or now everywhere around on the digital things, you go to any of the online sites to find out what your house value is, and just watch how many texts you get out of the blue randomly from people saying, "Hey, I'm a buyer in the neighborhood. Are you interested in selling your house?" I mean, it's so crazy, right? You get hounded like that. But, having the ability to kind of put on these X-ray glasses and float over a neighborhood, and all the houses that are going to sell in the next 2 years light up with this green glow, that's really an advantage. And we do that by realizing that the genesis thought of somebody selling their house is asking themselves the question, well, how much is my house worth? No matter any kind of planning, figuring, anything that they're doing is going to be based on what can we get for our place. That'll help me know, because I know how much the house that I want to buy is. How much am I going to get for mine? So asking that kind of information is the driver. But there's a big difference between what most agents are doing is they're saying, find out how much your house is. Call me for a CMA. I'll give you a price on your house, which is a subjective opinion of value, right? So everybody knows that the reason that you're doing a CMA is to get in the house and try and get me to list your house with me. And that's list my house with you. That's
Yeah.
really the
Sure.
real reason. That's
Sure.
why these vacation clubs give away weekends or give away cruises or whatever. So you can come spend the weekend at the resort for free, but you have to attend the pitch-a-thon, where they pitch you and try and sell you a timeshare.
Never ever again will I do that,
And
ever.
it's the same thing that people know. Then an opinion of value or a CMA means a realtor is going to come over and tell me why now's the time to sell and why they're the person to sell it and we need to list it right away. Well, what I discovered is objectively, you can let people scratch that itch that they have by offering them the free June 22 report on Winter Haven lakefront house prices. That sounds like objective market data that I can voyeur in on without identifying myself as a future value or embroiling myself in a reciprocity loop
Hmm.
that I don't feel obligated by having you come over to my house. I'm not sure that I'm ready to sell yet, but I sure would love to see that report so we can get people to ask for that report more than we can get them to ask for anything else. And I've experimented with all of it. Sell your house in 90 days guaranteed is approaching people who want to sell right now, which is what people who are doing marketing are really looking for. But it's short-sighted because it costs the same amount of money to send out the postcard that is only appealing to, let's call it, if it's a 6% turnover rate in an area and we just evenly distribute that over any month, you're talking about a half of 1% of the entire neighborhood is even in the market to sell their house right now or within the next 90 days. And if I'm not trying to sell my house in the next 90 days, there's no reason for me to respond to that.
Yeah.
But if I'm thinking about making a move, and here comes this offer of a report that's already done that I can voyeur in on, I don't have to talk to anybody. It's easy for me to raise my hand and get that information. But by raising my hand, I've identified myself as somebody who's higher likelihood than the general population to list their house in the next 2 years. So now if I follow up with all of those people, and at the same time, I'm finding buyers without needing those listings to get the buyers, I don't have to go in and see any of them and say, when we list your house, here's the marketing plan that we use to expose your house to the market. I can go in and say, listen, I've been looking for the buyer for your house for the last 12 months. And I've got a list of 1,000 people who are looking for townhouses in Poughkeepsie. And I email them every week with all the updates. And matter of fact, I told the list that I was coming over to see about a potential new one coming on. And I've got 13 people that asked me to send them information as soon as I find out more.
That's awesome.
That's a much better gift to them,
Yeah. Well, I know because I used your service for a while, and we listed 4 in a building with only 44 units called Envelope Terrace in Worcester, Massachusetts. We ended up listing 3 units in a year, and it got a buyer side on one by using your postcard. So
Nice.
absolutely. But at the same time, we were still calling too, though. So
Right.
we do still call. So
Yeah.
we haven't completely eliminated the calling
That's
yet.
okay. But it's
But
nice to make, I'm calling those warm calls. It's nice to call people you already know are
yeah.
thinking about selling rather than having to call all of them to find those people
Well,
who,
we were doing it at the same time. So we
yeah,
were
got it.
postcards, and we were mailing, we were doing Facebook ads, but
Yeah,
but altogether, it was an awesome result.
that's
I
great.
want to see if anybody in Clubhouse, we got some people in Clubhouse. Anybody on the stage have a question for Dean? If you do, just give me a mic flash. And this is a live podcast, so anybody have a question they want to ask Dean? Well, this is an awesome opportunity. So if you have one, don't be shy. All right. Well, Dean, doesn't look like anybody on stage wants to ask you a question. If anyone wants to raise their hand, feel free. I'll bring you up. I want to talk to you. Well, let's kind of talk about this as we're kind of going to start wrapping up.
Okay.
Right now, the market, just not even so much the market. I mean, inventory is still low, right? So I feel like as long as inventory is low, we're not, the supply and demand is going to tell us that prices aren't going to come down. It's not going to be crazy, but there's going to be some changes. So what are your thoughts on?
Yeah,
On
well, I think the bubble, I think that the bubble is not that the prices have gotten too high and they're going to come down. I think the bubble that's going to slow down is the appreciation, the rate of appreciation. They're not going to go up by 20% more. They're going to level off, but they'll certainly, I believe, still be worth more next year than they are this year, just because of what you said, the inherent supply and demand. And you've got entire segments of the market are shrinking because all the hedge funds are buying everything to the left of the bell curve, single family homes that are, viable for rental pools. They're buying them up instantly. That's what's driving a lot of the iBuyers is this hedge fund money. And there's some cases overpaying by 10% for properties. But what that's really saying is these hedge funds have so much unrealized capital gains in equities that the stock market has done so spectacularly that they're betting that overpaying for single family homes in Phoenix by 10% is a better 10-year bet than sticking with these overinflated equities that we've had. And we're already seeing the market correcting because there's no underlying demand or supply and demand issue in the stock market. So stock market's correcting, but the real estate market is driven by all of those other factors,
Wow.
I think it's going to be years before we ever catch up supply side wise.
Yeah, I agree. Well, let me ask you this, because you mentioned earlier, I mean, what are you telling your clients to tell, the sellers that still think they're going to get 102% or 108%? I mean, in some cases they can, but the reality is most places it's not that. You're not seeing 15 offers anymore, 10% over asking, 5%.
Right.
You know what I mean? So what are you telling the sellers to kind of get them to start to think normal? Like, I don't know.
Well, I think that's the thing. It's giving people a chance. That's why it's even more important that you have a way to find both the buyers and the sellers, so that you've got an opportunity to be a market maker rather than having just sitting with the listings,
So you're really bullish on finding the buyers and the
Yeah, I'm bullish on making your own economy. Making your own economy. We are, we're agents, which means we have agency and we can move to adjust with whatever the market does, right? In 2008, when the correction came and there was a lot of foreclosures, we immediately shifted to focusing on bank-owned homes.
Yeah, same thing.
And the first-time buyer credit. And that market was really buoyant. There were a lot of everybody who had sat out or missed out in the big rise up in the mid 2000s there, they were happy because now the prices had come down and they're getting money from the government to buy. It was, what I learned playing tennis all those years was that every shot makes somebody happy. And whatever the market is doing, there's always going to be opportunities.
Yeah.
It's just finding them, adapting, and then applying your marketing abilities to being a market maker within those parameters.
100%. So for Dean, for people that want to learn more about your services and get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
So I do a podcast called the Listing Agent Lifestyle at listingagentlifestyle.com. And then I'm building a community of people who are applying that listing agent lifestyle to their business at gogoagent.com.
Okay. And do you have time for one more question, or how are you doing on time? Or do you have
I do, of course. Yeah.
Okay. Because Sam, I know someone just raised their hand. I know, Sam, did you have a question on Clubhouse? Because I saw you raised your hand. Did you want to ask Dean something?
Absolutely. Dean, oh my God, I haven't seen you in eons since the last, wow, Joe Stump thing. We met in person a long time ago, but I'm always
that's awesome.
watching. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no.
Nice to reconnect. Yeah.
Oh my God, yeah. Do you remember me? I don't know if you remember me. It's been a long time.
I can't see you. What's your name?
Sam Silver.
Oh yeah, okay. I remember Sam Silver. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I came in here, David. I love your rooms, and I saw Dean on the stage. I'm like, oh my God.
Awesome, man. Yeah, awesome.
Hey, do you know about charitable gifts of real estate to nonprofits? That's a really great way to build a business right now with all this stuff going on.
I love it. That's great. Yeah. I mean, see, this is the thing, is that these niche programs and specialty programs, there's so many things you can build an empire around just one thing. I mean, we've done that when the market shifted to, there was a lot of foreclosures and we were focused on the bank-owned homes. The absolute sweet spot of that was buying a bank-owned home with the $8,500 tax credit and a USDA farmer's home loan with zero down and closing costs covered by the seller. That was like the sweet spot. And if you can orchestrate all those pieces to come together and then introduce that, tell that story to the people who are going to benefit from it, that's a winning formula.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a tax deduction also. Since 1917, it's been around, and a lot of people don't know about it.
Amazing.
Charitable gift, real estate to nonprofit. It's a tax code, and it could be a nonprofit, could be a 501c3 charity, or it could also be a religious charity, which I just found out it's 508 something. I have to look it up, but there's a religious charity that it could be given to as well. But yeah, wow. I just did a podcast, or I just did a Zoom meeting about it a few minutes ago.
Well, thanks for popping up and sharing that with us, man. We appreciate that. So Dean, in kind of wrapping up, man, like what's the one thing you want to say right now? We got a lot of real estate agents that listen to this podcast. There's a lot of uncertainty out there right now. That's a reality. We have uncertainty. They have uncertainty. The clients, the sellers, the buyers. What are you saying to real estate agents right now?
Yeah, I'm saying, just be optimistic and take proactive. If you just observe what's going on in the market and take that approach, what is the current environment? Who's winning in the current environment? Who's going to win? And Wayne Gretzky always used to say, skate to where the puck is going, not where it is, and that, or not where it's been. So look forward and see who's going to be the the winners here, no matter what happens. You build your strategy around, what's going on, what you observe, and see what's happening right now.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And that's what we're going to wrap it up right there. So I just want to say, I appreciate your time, man. It's been a pleasure to have you on
I'm
the
glad
show.
we were able to pull it off.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. So skate to where the puck is going. And that's all you need to do. And you will come out of this on a better, more profitable, and better business. So thank you, Dean. Appreciate you, sir.
Awesome. Thanks, David.
All right.